All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. Little surprise for you. Starting a little early this week for week 6, the showdown slate tonight. We have the man, the myth, the legend with me, Mr. Awesemo. Alex Baker, how are you tonight, sir?
I'm doing well, man. Pinch hitting for Emac here. He couldn't make it for our showdown breakdown, but we got our article up on the website, so you can check that out and follow with us live while we're breaking it down.
Yeah. And exciting matchup tonight. We have the Los Angeles Chargers. If I call them San Diego, hopefully the over/under on me calling them San Diego tonight, I think is set at 2.5. We'll see where that lands at the end of the show tonight. Hosting the Pittsburgh Steelers, 6.5-point favorites. The Chargers, over/under 41.5 heading into tonight. How you feeling about tonight's matchup?
Man, tonight will be a great test of the question if quarterback matters, because Pittsburgh, they lost Ben Roethlisberger for the year. Mason Rudolph was knocked out of last week's game, and now they're on this guy Devlin Hodges, who I don't think he's been practicing very much with the main team here all season. So it should be a great test to see how these third stringers fit in.
Man, yeah, just interesting and sad to see how Pittsburgh's, quarterback situation has really just fallen apart before even the midpoint, here. So yeah, it'll be interesting, and it's really interesting and some things to consider heading into tonight's matchup and putting lineups together and those sorts of things. But we're going to break it all down. Feel free to throw in your questions, comments throughout the show. We'll try to get to them where we can. We'll go team by team. Position by position. We'll cover some strategy. What else? Anything else you want to talk tonight?
Just general strategy. Like one thing I noticed about this slate is that a lot of times on these showdown slates, it really pays to go to the quarterbacks. But this one's interesting because I think some of the position players should be the best plays.
Yeah. So let's. With that being said, I think it's probably good to dive right in. Do you want to give a shout out to our sponsors?
Yes, Fantasydraft, one of my favorite places to play because, of course, they have no rake. That means that every time you cash in the contest, you're winning more money than on any other site. Like, for instance, a couple weeks back, our boy Adam Scherer took down the first prize in their main event for 100K. I ended up getting third. And usually, if you get third on in a DFS tournament, I mean it's good, but not that good. Like a lot of times, third place is like 10 to 15% of first place, but this time it was 30% because of the lack of rake. So that was an extra 15K in my pocket, and can't complain about that.
That's amazing. And I want to just say I love seeing the at EMAC DFS. Shout out to EMAC now being with us for his typical Sunday evening slate. But yeah, that's great. I mean, it's definitely something you want to consider. Who doesn't like a little extra cash, right? When you get that victory.
That's right. Yeah. I mean, one other thing that's cool is on Fantasy Draft they have the Sunday night game in the main slate, so you can if you enter this main event, you might have some of these Pittsburgh and LA players, and you can sweat it along with some showdown contests as well.
Cool. Well, let's. With that being said, let's go ahead and dive right in. Starting where we always start off with, we'll start with I guess the favorites for tonight, and topic most folks will want to. A team most folks will be considering is the LA Chargers quarterback situation there. Mr. Philip Rivers, the veteran, the gunslinger. Just kind of love Philip Rivers, love his attitude, love the way he plays the game. Putting together a lineup approaching tonight. Is Philip someone that you're considering in every lineup, or how you approaching him for tonight?
I have him in a little bit more than half of my lineups, which is a little bit low for a quarterback, to be honest.
Yeah.
I feel like the Chargers, I mean, they have a huge advantage in this game going up against the third string quarterback, so I have a lot of Chargers defense. I'm kind of playing for the Chargers having to run the ball a lot. And Philip Rivers doesn't really run the ball; he only passes. So to get it done, the Pittsburgh has to put up some points and give him some room to throw the ball. And I'm a little skeptical that will happen. What are you making of this matchup?
Yeah, I think that's probably the consensus, and while I would love to be and play devil's advocate here, it's hard to, right, when you're down to a third string QB on Pittsburgh's side where you don't expect the offense to be creating a lot of opportunities and just maintaining possession of the ball for that matter, and staying in the game. I don't see how it isn't a blowout, and I don't, and when you consider that potential gameplay, to your point, you got two good running backs with LA, likely that they're going to run the ball, especially as the game goes on, if they do have a lead. And so it's tough. I think it's interesting to point out Rivers, while he's been pretty consistent week after week here as of late, with tonight's matchup, I could see where maybe isn't throwing the ball around come late third, early fourth quarter.
Yeah, exactly. And another knock against Rivers is since he doesn't run the ball, it's pretty likely that one of the receivers, if he has a big game, will outscore him, namely Mike Williams and Keenan Allen. So one of the features we have on the site is my top showdown players. I just updated for the slate tonight. So Rivers, we have him projected to be 13% owned at the captain spot.
Mm-hmm.
I have him as only a 10% chance of being the top scoring player on the slate. Compared to Keenan Allen, who's 14% owned, just a tiny bit more owned and captain, but I have him for more than twice the chance of being the top scoring player. So I think Rivers makes a lot of sense to me as a flex player, kind of like pairing him up with captain Mike Williams or Keenan Allen.
Gotcha. Now, is someone that maybe isn't, he doesn't have access to the numbers, or someone that, just kind of outsider looking in, not an expert like yourself, I would say to myself, well, why wouldn't I start Philip Rivers in that captain spot, as opposed to Keenan Allen? If Keenan Allen's going to get points, right, it's going to have to come from Philip. Help me understand, is it just because of projections, or how do you kind of come to that conclusion?
The reason why is because the receiver gets more points per play that they connect. So the receiver's getting 1 point every 10 yards. The quarterback's getting 1 for every 25. Receiver gets 6 points for the touchdown. The quarterback gets 4. So the bottom line is if Keenan Allen ends up going for more than 100 yards and a touchdown, it's going to be hard for Philip Rivers to equal that kind of fantasy performance.
Yep, cool. Makes sense. Good insight. Appreciate it. So, like Rivers, don't necessarily love him across the board tonight. Moving right along to the next position, I think worth covering for LA for that perspective, and probably the position that we can kind of split a lot of different ways, is the running back spot. The return of Melvin Gordon last week, as expected, kind of eased back into the lineup. Projected probably to get a few extra touches this week. Eckler, had a good game, mostly from a reception perspective. How are you approaching the running back position tonight? What do you love?
I think I'm leaning towards Gordon. Last week he ran 12 times, Eckler's 4. So the conclusion I'm drawing from this is that they're kind of reverting back to last year's dynamic, where Eckler is kind of the passing downs back, while Melvin Gordon is kind of the clock control and first down back. And I think in this game, if they're playing from ahead, that'll probably mean a lot of running clock, and Gordon's going to be out there doing that. So I think I prefer him. But Eckler, I mean, we've seen he's had a tremendous year so far, so he's kind of the sleeper play.
Now, as we talked about earlier, the gameplay and the flow of the game, we do expect to see LA have the lead much of the game, and certainly late on. Is this a lineup? Is this a matchup tonight where you're considering both running backs, as opposed to maybe other nights where you'd want to go kind of one or the other?
Yeah, you could definitely run on both. I mean, in a game that's kind of low scoring, there's a pretty high potential that both running backs will be two of the top 6 players. So I think, especially if the Chargers run the ball like 30 or more times, which is that's on the high end compared to average, I'd say. But I think Melvin Gordon will be limited to the high teens. The remaining carries will probably go to Eckler. So I think that leaves room, if they're running the ball a ton, for both of them to have a lot of attempts.
Yeah, and with a 41.5 point spread, that Vegas isn't really projecting this to be a super high scoring game. Steelers have invested in their defense, certainly, which has kind of helped keep them in games, over the last few weeks. But to your point, yes, this is likely a game where they're getting a lot of attempts, controlling the clock, and having the ball late. Is there any chance that I don't know if you've gotten super deep, behind Eckler, behind Gordon, if it is a huge blowout, any love to anybody else in the LA side?
We'll have to wait to see if they have any other running backs active. I think last week they had Derek Watt as the fullback. Maybe maybe he'd get some carries and a complete blowout, but
Two-headed monster tonight.
yeah, I'm expecting basically these two guys to get all the work.
Gotcha. So as we move past the running back spot for LA, and definitely interesting, we'll see how the split goes tonight, and obviously game flow will certainly play into that as well. The wide receiver position, it's hard to keep track of who's even been on the field for LA. It seems like they have this constant rotation of wide receivers coming in. There is one consistent player week in and week out. We talked about him just briefly already. That's Keenan Allen. Mike Williams active tonight. Dontrell Inman, who jumped up in the last couple of weeks, he's out. How you approaching? Who do you like in the wide receiver position tonight?
I think Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both tremendous plays, especially since this is just a one-game slate here. These two guys, along with Eckler, are probably making up a large majority of the yardage that Philip Rivers will dish out. At tight end, it's kind of interesting because Hunter Henry is back. So
yeah.
I know they had another tight end, Sean Calkin, go down to injury for the year. So it'll be interesting to see. Like, they had Virgil Green, Lance Kendricks in there. If Henry is a full go, that could be really interesting. Maybe that would take away from Mike Williams, but it's hard to project him to be in the game aggressively at a high rate because they probably will ease him back into the rotation. So I really like Allen and Mike Williams here.
Yeah, you'd expect so, right? Typically, a team, someone coming, and he was even, it wasn't like he was a sure thing all week, right? So I think it was kind of coming down to it. Are they going to put him in the lineup tonight? So you expect to ease him back. Likely means a lot of targets for the wide receivers, and they are rather thin at that position. Besides those two, looking at projections, looking at others that may get some consideration. Who's the low cost wide receiver that you like tonight from San Diego? Is it Travis Benjamin? Where anybody else that you see, or are you just trying to kind of stick into those two as well?
Travis Benjamin's the only one I think will really see the field enough to be considered, but I think he'll play a lot more if the Chargers are down and they're doing some 3 wide receiver sets. If they're playing from ahead, it's unlikely he'll be on the field. So if I'm picking Benjamin, I'll probably pick some Pittsburgh offensive players to try to have a game script where Pittsburgh puts up some early points.
Yep. Yeah, it's it's kind of slim pickings again, just kind of a couple targets here or there for anybody beyond the Benjamin spot tonight. So expect to be, again, similar, almost a two-headed monster with Benjamin maybe mopping up a few random targets there. Touched on the tight end spot. Good to see Hunter Henry return. Hopefully he can stay healthy for Philip Rivers. I know historically he's leaned on Antonio Gates. Seems like forever, and so with him, finally, retiring, moving on, Henry is there to kind of pick it up. So we'll see if he can step in tonight, to what degree that is, and something to consider as putting together your lineup. I think one spot that a lot of people do like and are interested in, and I've seen a few comments flying in about it, is LA's defense. How are you approaching them tonight, knowing we're facing a third-string QB for Pittsburgh?
I like them. I like them a lot. I think that they've been pretty decent so far, and having a matchup with Devlin Hodges that should give them a smash spot here. I think that the price 5,200 is pretty reasonable, and the thing I like most about playing the Chargers defense is it plays really well in a Chargers team stack. So if you pick 5 Chargers players and 1 Pittsburgh player, I think that's probably going to optimize your chance of having the winning lineup. So I have a lot of lineups that kind of fit that build.
One thing I noticed was interesting was the cost of the Chargers defense. While certainly you like them a lot tonight, DraftKings I think had him at 5,200, where typically you're seeing defenses fall somewhere in the 3,000s, maybe low fours. You concerned or just does that scare you away at all from the defense tonight?
Well, it's interesting because the defense is actually cheaper than the kickers today. Usually it's flipped the other way. So we have the Steelers defense is also 5,100. Chris Boswell for Pittsburgh 5,400, and then we have the kicker for the Chargers. A new one this week, Chase McLaughlin. He's 5,700. So really, these guys are all the same price. So as far as defense kickers, you gotta just pick your favorite one, and to me, that is the Chargers defense, because that really builds that narrative into your lineup. Where if you have a Chargers stack, you have a combination that's more likely to hit.
Yeah, it's funny. We've been doing these showdown slates. I was looking back at a few that EMAC and I did, and it's easy to want to get behind one team, right? Looking weeks past, I think we had Dallas was playing New Orleans, and we loved Dallas. New Orleans was on the Teddy Bridgewater, and what happened, right? New Orleans punched him in the mouth and ended up beating him that game. And New Orleans players, really performed well. So while we do, it seems hard not to get behind LA tonight. There is another team playing.
There is.
And so it's probably worth mentioning these players, because we know they have great players. That's the one thing. They do have some great skilled players, but there's no denying that. And they have some great players on the defensive side of the ball. So they're good, when players go down, when QBs go down, you see these guys, they're competitive in nature, and they have some great players on that side of the ball. They step up. Everybody kind of elevates their game oftentimes, realizing they can't, they're not going to get a Pro Bowl performance out of their QB. They know they have to kind of pick up the slack a little bit. So as you're approaching tonight's matchup, and while LA seems to be the heavy favorite, QB spot, it's a QB. And, we just talked about how we do like the Chargers. What do you think? Do we like Devlin Hodges? Do we? How are you approaching it? Are you putting him playing 2 QBs tonight? What are your thoughts?
I think Hodges is pretty reasonable to play for sure. I mean, to be honest, I don't know much about him, but he's throwing the football for the Steelers, and that says enough to me.
Yeah.
I have him as about a 60% chance of being one of the top 6 players in scoring, and he's not that expensive for the position, so I think he makes a nice play. I have a lot of the nice thing about the Steelers offense is that some of the key players are out. So we have James Washington out at wide receiver. We have Jalen Samuels out at running back.
Yes.
So that should give a little bit more work to some of these other guys to stack up with Hodges, and you can make some nice lineups with some of these pairings.
Yeah, for those of you, myself included, don't know much about Devlin Hodges. He was a 4-year starter, and if you haven't read EMAC's article on awesemo.com, 4-year starter at Samford University, that's in the Southern Conference, mind you, but 30-plus TDs in 3 of those seasons. So, We've just signed, just brought in, into the team, making his debut on the road. You can't necessarily love your chances. Chargers only do have 12 sacks on the season, so there's that to consider. But a guy like that, 30-plus TDs, no matter where you're throwing it around, we've seen time and time again young QBs, rookie QBs step in and maybe not excel, but have the ability to at least hold their own, complete the passes that they need to. I'm sure that everyone trying to get the ball into the skilled players' hands tonight. So we'll see. It'll be interesting. I'm rooting for the underdog devil, and it's hard not to.
For sure, and I think that I'm a little bit hard on the Steelers here. According to Vegas, they actually have a 30% chance of winning this game. So I'm going to certainly have some stacks of Steelers players, hoping they far exceed expectations here and dominate this game.
Yeah, I think that's again, it's 30% isn't terrible for you being on your third string QB. So that they obviously like some position matchups elsewhere. We talked about Pittsburgh's defense, the investments they've made there even early on the season, and other veteran players, other good skill players, which we want to jump into right now, is the skill position for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think maybe start with wide receiver with them, if that's okay, because we know who the running back is that's going to get the majority of the carries. It seems like big night for Connor as far as percentage goes. Let's go to the wide receiver position. We got Juju. James Washington has already been ruled out. So we're talking Deontay Johnson. We're talking Johnny Holton. Perhaps Witzer. We've heard of Dante Moncrief, but it doesn't seem like he's been in their plans as of late. Mm-hmm. So putting together the lineups for tonight, Juju's obviously the most expensive of the group. Deontay Johnson has been solid of late. How are you approaching the wide receiver position for Pittsburgh?
I think I like both of those guys. They take a hit with Hodges at QB as opposed to Rudolph. But they're still making my lineups a lot. I mean, Deontay Johnson, he's a guy who's playing most of the game. Relatively cheap at $6,400, so he makes a nice substitute for a kicker or a defense on this slate. Then you got Juju Smith-Schuster, who's $8,800. That's a lot less expensive than the top Chargers players. So he makes a nice kind of cost savings play when he's really probably as talented as any other player in this game. So I think that both of those guys make really nice plays. And I like that you mentioned Johnny Holton because he showed up in a bunch of my lineups. I'm like, how did this happen? But I mean, with James Washington out last game, Switzer saw, or I guess Washington was injured midway through the game. Switzer only saw 2 snaps the entire game, and Johnny Holton saw 20. So it's clear that Johnny Holton is the WR3 here.
Yeah, it's something to consider. Especially if you're looking at a situation where Pittsburgh potentially is down late in the game, and again, all potential here, and LA maybe sagging back, giving some underneath passes, just some of that mop-up duty, which we know is oftentimes where a lot of points stem from. Perhaps he's that third guy for Pittsburgh that they go to for tonight. So one thing I saw a statistic I want to mention. I think it's Deontay Johnson is leading the league in separation. Some of these advanced statistics that are out there, separation from defender. So guys got speed, no denying that. Someone's obviously got to get it to him, but it sounds like he's creating that separation that's needed and impressive for someone early on in their career. Moving on to the running back spot tonight, James Conner, the obvious pick, the workhorse for tonight for Pittsburgh. How are you approaching him? Is he in a lot of your lineup? I think projections, throwing a little bit of the info, I think projections he's right around the same ownership as Phillip Rivers. Captainship just below that for someone who will probably get a lot of attempts, and a lot of probably pass attempts as well, or targets, I should say. How are you feeling about Conner tonight?
I like Connor. I think that he makes a nice play at either captain or MVP on FanDuel, and also at the flex positions because he's going to be out there getting a lot of reps. And one of the things I like about running back as the MVP is when they score points, they get those all to themselves, at least with the rushing attempts. With wide receivers, you're splitting the points with the quarterback, and that makes it a little bit harder to be the top scorer on the slate. So relative to the projection, the running backs are better plays, and I'm seeing that on my FanDuel top player percentage here. James Conner is only 10% owned at MVP, but I'm projected to be about 15% chance of being the top scorer. So that's a huge edge you can exploit on FanDuel.
No, that's amazing. That's a great insight. Yeah, for someone who, to your point, they get all the points when they score, right? They're not splitting it across. And gosh, I can't imagine what percentage of his team's offensive workload he's going to get tonight. After Connor, what's next? Who's even the backup for?
Yeah, I had to look this up, man.
Deep into the archives to find that information.
Yeah, Benny Snell. It was kind of interesting because Pittsburgh last game with Samuels that they played in the showdown slates, Samuels actually ran some snaps as out of the Wildcat. I don't know if Benny Snell will figure into the plan the same way, but I expect him to see the field a decent amount. He was even getting some attempts while both running backs were healthy. But backup running back on a team that's a dog, that's not my favorite spot to target.
No, not necessarily. But, who knows, right? Connor's going to be on the field a lot. Maybe he gets a blow at some point, and our boy breaks one. But no, I'm not holding my breath on it. And it doesn't sound like you are either. So moving right along, tight end position for Pittsburgh. We have the return of Vance McDonald tonight, who had some good games early on, has been injured as of late. With a third string QB, and really for any young QB for that matter, they always, they like to have that safety blanket. The tight end is that safety blanket. Vance McDonald stepping in tonight, back as the starter. Is he that, if you're going Chargers heavy, is he maybe that Steeler that you're including? How are you approaching Vance tonight?
Yeah, I like Vance. I think that when he's healthy, he's a great player. And last week he played 35 of 58 snaps, so I think this week he might get a little bit more of the action. He's clearly their preferred tight end in the receiving game, with running 24 routes to Vinette's 9. So I'm a little bit surprised that the Steelers traded for Vinette if they're not going to utilize him that much.
Right.
But I guess McDonald is kind of like, maybe people lean away from him because he's been banged up. But he's a good talent, and he can do it himself. He doesn't need he can get a lot of yards after the catch. He doesn't need the quarterback to be throwing it way downfield to get the fantasy points.
Yeah, good point. And something to consider, right? Depending if you're, what site you're doing your league through, or you're doing your lineups through. PPR, to be a factor. McDonald probably not someone that's going to break a long one like someone like Juju or Deontay Johnson, but could be a target monster tonight with again a young QB throwing his way, looking his way often. Assuming he's going to be in trouble. So as we move right along, Pittsburgh, the defense for them tonight, we've talked about how we do like LA, but it likely, it projects to be a lower scoring game tonight. Is there any way you're approaching this Steeler defense as a team that you want and feel confident in, or is this just kind of a, hey, trying to change things up, want to do something different and buck the trend? Maybe I'll include Steelers defense.
I think I will have a good amount of Steelers defense. I think actually it looks like I had these salaries wrong. I was looking at the MVP salaries, but they're 3,400. That's pretty reasonable. Like the Chargers certainly don't turn over the ball a great amount, but I like the correlation with the defense. and sacking the team. So I think that makes a nice correlation play. In addition, I think everyone likes to play fantasy to try to hit the high scores. But in a low scoring game, both defenses will probably be among the top players. And that might be a situation that fewer players are playing for, or a scenario that fewer people are trying to anticipate. And that just means less people to split the top money with.
Yeah, which who doesn't want that? Right?
That's right. I won one of these slates, and I won like it was 400K to first. I finished first, and I won like $1,800. So
Come on.
yeah.
That's so disappointing. If someone like me won that, I'd be calling in like, "Hey guys, I think you got this wrong. What's going on here?
Yeah.
I need it." Anyways, it's Pittsburgh's defense. It's tough, right? And again, we think, he hasn't been sacked very much. They have turned the ball over. He does have 4 interceptions. They've fumbled the ball 4 times. So, sometimes Rivers does like to take chances. We've seen that. He's not afraid to give his guys the opportunity to make a play in a man-to-man situation. And, Pittsburgh going to be looking to put pressure on the QB tonight. Maybe they make him, cause a few turnovers, cause some havoc, and can make a play. And this is going to be a night tonight where Pittsburgh realizes that the defense is going to have to step up. They know that coming into tonight. They know they have to, go on the road. You can't say a hostile environment. I think LA is like the nicest environment for any road team to go in. I mean, seriously, it's how many fans even make the trip, right? I think that, so defense steps up. Maybe they make make some plays tonight, and special teams. You can always factor that in again when a team knows they have to step up. Is there any when you're putting your lineups together? I think it's common. People want to use up all the money, right? They have the available funds. If you're thinking it's going to be a low scoring game, 2 defenses. How do you what's your approach there? Any advice, or is that something you just would like to stay away from? Like would prefer to hedge your bet on one or the other?
I think you can go both defenses for sure. And what you're playing for is a game where the pace of play is pretty low, and the Chargers play at one of the slowest paces in the league, so that's certainly possible. And I think it's just, as I was saying, like not that many people play for that kind of scenario. And they're good values individually, so I think that you can play one or both defenses for sure.
It's interesting. You always see the defense. People that have the defenses early on, they're up. And then by the end of the 4th quarter, it's, the garbage time. All these points start, kind of trickling in, and, they start just kind of whittling down and falling down the ranks, right? At least for the most part. So we'll see where that lands tonight. Pittsburgh's defense, again, tough, but will be a tough matchup against good offense and good players on the road. So we kind of broke down position by position. So as you're looking at strategies, things of that nature, whether it's 2 QBs, we talked about defenses or different folks within the captain or position. Any kind of out of the hot takes tonight? Any random? Hey, I think I'm just kind of feeling this in my gut outside of just the numbers. I think the world wants to know. We know the numbers. What's your gut telling you?
Man, you're asking the wrong guy. But I usually just kind of go with the numbers and call it a day. But you're putting me to the test here. I think the biggest advice that I can give people is not to go for the cute plays. Like, for example, like Dante Moncrief, probably someone who won't even play the game. But people will still play him because they recognize the name and they need someone at that price point. So, a lot of these guys who may seem like sleeper plays to you actually end up having some significant ownership. So I find that the worst plays on the slate are usually over-owned.
Well, that's you heard it, folks. Don't be dumb. I was putting together a lineup, and I had my trigger finger on Dante Moncrief, and I thought, no way in hell I can go on the air later with Dante Moncrief in my lineup tonight. Although someone he's a guy that hell before the season started, he was projected to be Pittsburgh's number 2,
I know.
right?
Yeah.
Gosh, it's crazy how things change so quickly in the NFL. Rooting for Dante Moncrief, but don't see any promise in him for tonight.
Well, he was inactive last week, so if he is active this week, he may play. So that's the best I can endorse him.
We got a couple minutes here until we wrap up. We got the afternoon games going on. Tomorrow night's matchup for Monday Night Football, NFC North matchup. Detroit Lions heading out to Green Bay. Should be a tough matchup. Detroit coming off a bye. Green Bay's look pretty good. Interesting game for tomorrow night as well.
That's going to be a great one, man. The NFC North, as you know, being a Bears fan, I take it, it's so tough. Every team has a winning record so far. And Green Bay versus Detroit, you'll love to see that.
Yeah, it's tough. It's Minnesota had another. Gosh, when they put it together, they just seem like a team that can beat anyone, right? It's amazing to see Kirk Cousins the way he stepped up after getting called out by his teammates pretty publicly a couple of weeks back. But yeah, NFC North matchup tomorrow night. Excited for tonight's matchup though. So we got 7:15, 7:20 start, 7:20 start, I believe, out in LA. So it'll be daytime still there. And wildfires, all that craziness going on out there. If you're watching, if you're tuning in from the Southern California part of the country, hope you're safe. Hope things are going well for you. Thinking about you guys, it's crazy to see all that stuff going on out there.
Yeah, man. I haven't been following it, but I know, man. I hear that if you're in the LA area, you just can see fires from your office and stuff. It sounds crazy.
That's crazy. Yeah. So I know I know you can't pick your head up. You're in the middle. We got all these sports going on. We got hockey's underway. Basketball's getting ready to pick up. Football obviously in week 6. Baseball wrapping up. Playoffs. So that's exciting stuff. There's a lot of great content on Awesemo for whatever your cup of tea is, whatever your sport is, and a lot of great opportunities and offers and information out there for you.
Definitely, yeah. I mean, at the end of the day, we all want to be successful playing daily fantasy sports. And I've been playing professionally for years. I figured out what you have to do, and I've kind of used my models that I've built to project these games to give everyone good information to rely on, because I know there's so many different people offering up their advice every week. You can know on our site that it's going to be solid advice that you can put your money on. Absolutely,
and that's what you want, right? Again, we all want to be successful, and again, great content out there. Thanks, Alex. Anything else? Any other kind of final closing thoughts as we approach 4:15 for you and I in the Central? Anything else you want to chat about for tonight's game? LA again hosting Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, I think that the natural tendency is to imagine the Chargers kind of controlling this game, but they only have a 70% chance to win, and if you're trying to split these tournaments with only a few people, you got to play for some less likely scenarios. So maybe playing some lineups where you think Pittsburgh will run away with the game, although it's less likely, that could pay off bigger when it hits.
That's exactly it, right? And to the point you made earlier, finishing in first place in a contest and splitting it however many ways isn't really a whole lot of fun. Right?
Yeah, it's a good story though, so I don't want to totally say it sucks, but winning $1,800 off $10 isn't as exciting as winning a 6-figure score.
Absolutely. Oh yeah, and so something to consider, right? It's Guys, I feel like the showdown slates that we've done, that's been the case almost every single time. Is you think it's going to be one thing and it ends up being the other. It was Kansas City against Indianapolis. I talked about Dallas and New Orleans. Just time and time again, you see it. So to differentiate yourself, you got to take those flyers.
Yeah, everyone will be on the most likely outcomes. So if you want to kind of have an outright victory, you got to play knowing that your lineup is less likely to succeed.
Yeah. Oh, we got some injuries popping in here. These afternoon games not looking good. Amari Cooper.
Thanks.
Anyways, all right, Alex. Anything else that you wanted to mention? And I think first of all, it's been awesome doing a show with you, man. We haven't done a show together in a long time. This is great doing one with you, and bringing you for the showdown slate, bringing the heavy artillery for the people.
Yeah, man, it's great doing this show with you. We haven't done one since the draft, so this is big. Thanks everyone for watching and supporting our stream, and thanks Fantasy Draft. It's definitely the best place to play. I mean, straight up, they charge less money for you to play fantasy sports than any other site, and that adds up real quick. I mean, that's 10% every single dollar you spend that you're saving, and if you play a lot of fantasy sports every week, then that'd be the number one place I'd play.
You heard it from the man, the champ. Well, thanks again, everyone, for tuning in. I believe I will be back with EMAC next week. If anything changes, we'll let you know. Thanks again, everyone, for tuning in, and have a great evening. Good luck.